Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're back with another emergency broadcast looking at the big October update for Infinity the Game in 5. We'll be covering other aspects of the update, including a first impression of Next Wave another time, but for now we're going to take a look at the very interesting changes made to PanO as a faction, and some of the sub-factions within PanO, with the primary focus being several balance changes to units and military orders. Now, military orders, it's been a very popular faction for a very long time, and along with old N4 JSA, sort of has a reputation as a bit of a noob trap and as a bit of a filter for people looking to enter the game. A lot of people will see the knights of the military orders, go, man, that's dope, I want to play that, and then really start to struggle with a lot of military orders' key weaknesses and challenges that present to them as a faction, and also just generally to heavy infantry factions. Now, moving from N4 to N5, they didn't get as much of a jump as maybe we would have hoped. They sort of got a lot of side grades in a lot of ways. They had a lot of points costs drop, but then they also had things like Frenzy start to affect them. Now, we had a few little tweaks here and there so far through the edition with Defersen and the Trinitarian Killer Hacker, but really, with the eclipse of this big October update, we're seeing some huge changes coming to military orders, and also a few more sprinkled around factions like Svalheima as well. So it's a very exciting time, and let's jump right in. Alright, so here we are in Infinity the Game N5 Army Builder, where before we jump to that changelog, we're going to take a look at the first major change to military orders, which is of course its fireteams chart. Now, something really great's happened with the military orders fireteams, finally getting the ability to duo. Now, this isn't as relevant for units like Crosiers, but is very impactful for units like Teutonic Knights, where now you can take your wild cards, of which you have many, and happily strap a Teutonic Knight to the end of them. This used to be a bit of a pain before. You'd have a unit like Defersen or a Knight of Justice Hacker, who would really benefit from that Tinbot Neg 3 from the Teuton, or even a unit like Hawkins, who himself would be a specialist, and was happy to lug around that Teuton just as a close combat brawler, really struggle to fit that around themselves, having to adhere to a Haris bonus. So this duo ability is a very big change, and we can see there's also been a major change in what can form a military orders fire team, as the Knight of Santiago FTO has really ceased being a wild card, and has gone up and just sort of been applied in different places. Now, the first place we see here is the Knight of Santiago FTO being able to be the basis of a military orders fire team. Now, honestly, I don't think you're going to build a military orders fire team off of a Santiago incredibly often. I can see you again doing some, duo with a Teutonic Knight Tinbot and a Knight of Santiago Spitfire, because the Killer Hacker already comes with a Tinbot. Other than that, they're not really giving you any keyword bonuses, so I don't see you putting, two Black Friars on a Knight of Santiago FTO. That seems, I don't know, it seems like there's some better ways to do that. But it's a nice option to have. They can go into a fire team in an okay way. I'm not entirely sure what the deal is here necessarily, but it is worthwhile to note that now you can build the team off of the Knight of Santiago. Now, going down to the Order Sergeant's fire team, we can see we've picked up Duo as well, but even if that was there before, it's still something you make use of an incredible amount of the time. The Knight of Santiago, again, it's popped up here. And now we go down to the Crusade fire team, where you can see the non-hospitalers have changed to FTOs and non-FTOs. This is actually a bit of a nerf, where we'll get to the Knights of Hospitalers soon, but you used to be able to link the forward deploying Knight Hospitalers with the non-forward deploying Knight Hospitalers. So this is a bit of a shame to see this sort of limitation come through on the Knight Hospitalers, who were a unit you didn't really see often, and I don't think this fire team change is going to necessarily help them in that way. Now, we used to have Knightly Duos fire teams, but it's been replaced with Velox fire teams. So Velox can be your new Ultima Ratio word for this week. Everyone comment Velox in the comments below. But you can still build little duos off of here. Now, moving down to the wild cards, the Knight of Justice has picked up the Hospitaller Knight keyword, which, honestly, I still don't think is going to be very impactful. If you are able to build a Knight Hospitaller team, say, off of Joan, I could see this potentially seeing a little bit more play. But ultimately, despite all the changes, I don't think you're going to be taking Knight Hospitallers at all, just period. I don't think they've improved enough, and we'll get to them when we get to them. So I don't see this as a very valuable tag at all. Next up, the Knight of Montesa FTO. So do note, this is the ground deployed Knight of Montesa. This is not the motorized Knight of Montesa. It's the ground deployed Knight of Montesa. So if you haven't seen the Knight of Montesa yet, it got a change in the release that just came a week or so ago and got updated with Varuna and Shock Army also picking up this new profile for military orders. And frankly, it's quite a good unit. If you haven't already seen it, it picks up BS attack +1 special die, Mim -3, limited cover, martial arts level 2, and this special die applies in reactive as well as active. So you've got just one FTO down here, which is the boarding shotgun Blitzen paramedic. I haven't had a chance to get this guy on the table yet, but he looks frankly fantastic. On reactive, he's getting burst 3 with that boarding shotgun, and same with that Blitzen as well. If you see your opponent and you look across their army and see that they don't have anything to deal with mimetism, suddenly you can put this guy up as quite a good ARO in that situation, or just have him as the tip of the spear after you've sort of finished your forward assault on an active turn and leave him as a very effective stopgap. Now, there's also a Knight of Montesa forward deployed boarding shotgun paramedic and a forward deployment Red Fury, and while they can deploy together in the Velox fire team, again, I'm just not a huge fan of forward deploying heavy infantry. You can see a few of my other videos if you want more rationale behind that. And I think potentially in other factions where you've got a bit more in terms of protection, or these are something you really need, like in Shock Army or Varuna, I think it's more of an attractive option. But in military orders where you already have such good and effective close assault, I think the forward deploying Knights of Montesas aren't necessarily something you need to look for. So moving on then, everything's basically the same until we notice a new profile, Mendoza FTO. So again, we'll get to him when we get to him, but that's a really great wildcard to have. So flicking over to the changelog, we'll come back to some of this more general Pano stuff, but we'll start with the first change to the Crosiers. Now the Crosiers, they've been a bit of a maligned line infantry for quite some time, mainly because they've always been, pretty expensive for what they do. Now, this hasn't necessarily changed. A lot of people were hoping for a points reduction, essentially, and there is a -1 points reduction across the board, which is pretty nice. -1 points reduction, it looks like just for the Blitzen, where you no longer have the combined Blitzen EM mine. But there's a bevy of changes here. The first one with the combi rifle. This used to be a combi rifle Blitzen EM mine, now just a combi rifle Blitzen, and it's dropped by a point. This is a bit of a sad change. This was a really nice little tech profile, but ultimately I think gaining a point by dropping that EM mine isn't terrible for how your lists are going to shake out. There were some really awkward times in list building where you would be, have some Crosiers and some links, and it was just 1 point over. Now, you can really pick between the 13 points paramedic and the 12-point Blitzen. Saving that point makes it, a couple lists work. It's a good side grade option as well. But again, look, it's a bit of a sad thing to see, but I'm not necessarily disappointed because it did get a little points drop. Now, Crosiers, they are very cheap. They are very expendable. And this Blitzen was a really nice disposable arrow, especially just on a BS12 line troop. You could get it up to BS13, but with the lack of tags, that's not something you necessarily want to do. But hey, that's okay. So then we've got another change here where we can see essentially the EM mine just got given to the multi-sniper instead, where that Crosier has also picked up Mind Layer. Now, I used to use Crosier multi-snipers quite a bit back in N4, but again, in N5, I just don't know if this is a unit you want to be taking. If we're looking at what you can put in the military orders fire team, you're really looking at taking Black Friars as your main gun pieces in that link. So anything you want to compare here has to be compared against a Black Friar. It is a decent bit cheaper. Your cheapest Black Friar is 22 points, but compared to the output you're getting, where Blackfriars have MSV, they have heavy albedo now at albedo 6, a better, I'd say potentially a better weapon, and a higher ballistics. I'm not sure if the Crosier is really going to be worth it here. Now, again, if you are building a full Crosier link, maybe that suddenly becomes more worthwhile, but I don't know if building that Crosier link is more worthwhile in the first place. But weapons and loadouts like this does make it more attractive than it used to be. Same with the Order Sergeant FTO and the new Knight Commander. Those units have gotten a lot better, as is Constantinos, one of your wild cards who picks up the tag. So you could start to experiment with full cores of Crosiers. Again, it'd be an interesting direction to take, but in the meta of N5 where you're looking for the best and most efficient duos you can, I don't know if it's worth it. It is a low SWIC option at just one SWIC, and that's one thing we've seen rebalance sort of across the Crosier range, I suppose, is that you're just paying the one SWIC. So you could staple together, say, the multi-sniper mine layer and say your Knight Commander or an Order Sergeant Hacker, who we'll get to very soon but has picked up pitchers. So just if you're wanting to strap a SWIC weapon to a pitcher or that Knight Commander, the EM mine is kind of a nice layer just to add to that defense where your hacker or your potential lieutenant are going to be targets. But I'm just not sure if it's going to cross that threshold. Now, the Spitfire, it's lost MSV2, and that's gone somewhere else. We'll get to that in a moment, but has picked up an X-Visor. Now, usually when you're looking at units who can really make good use of an X-Visor, they've either got just a monstrous ballistic stat, looking at someone like Joan, for example, or they've got mods that make essentially the X-Visor balance out like a Zulu Cobra. The Crosier has neither. Most of the time, the best you can do with a Crosier X-Visor is be on 9s, and that's just not, you're not shooting for the moon there. And I still don't think you're kind of crossing that threshold of your Crosier being an aggressive piece. Now, if we look at what are the baseline issues for military orders, one of them is sort of what I've called the Spitfire Club, which is you've got a lot of units such as Defersen, Hawkins, Knight of Justice, Crux Knight, Joan, who are all competing to be your gunfighter in that Spitfire range band. And though the Crosier's a fraction of the points, it's not getting anywhere near the result. It's not meeting that level of competency. So I just think the Spitfire's completely awful. Paramedics stayed the same. It's great. It's fine. You've had a few sort of buffs and things with medkits. But then we get to the big change, which is the Crosier MSV2 HMG. Now, this is clocking in at 1 SWIC and 24 points, which is a bit of a rough sell. If we're kind of taking things back, comparing it to the Black Friar again, you're going to see that you're paying a very similar price to the Black Friar, and you're sort of looking at either the Thunderbolt option, which is, again, the same points for no SWIC, or it's a Thunderbolt +1 burst with those heightened stats, or you're looking at the Light Rocket Launcher, which costs less, has less dice, but costs a bit more SWIC, where, again, I think this piece just fits in a really awkward position. I think for the same cost and no SWIC, I'd really rather be taking the Black Friar Thunderbolt +1 burst. In a link, you're only 1 die down, and the difference between 4 and 5 dice is when you really start to plateau in terms of the results you're getting. So I just don't think it's going to be a change that's going to be worth it. So again, if we look at the Black Friar here, you can see you've got the heavy albedo, you've got MSV level 2, you've got the higher ballistics, a little bit of armor if you care about that, and a nice little template on both as well. So I'm really not attracted to this new Crosier, as I'd rather pay no SWIC for the Thunderbolt +1 burst, or pay a bit more SWIC, drop in points for the heavy rocket launcher. Now, if you really are, again, if the pure core of Crosiers turns out to be good, that's when you might take it. But at this stage, I'm still really not convinced that that's where you want to be. So overall, how do I rate this change to the Crosiers? I guess I'm mid on the change with the Blitzen, and I don't think any of the other changes fix the problem with the Crosier. Now, units such as the Crosiers that, BS-12 line troops, they've previously had a long history of being really quite good with how fire teams affect them. Now, if you look in N4, the best line troops are going to be the ones that either provide a lot of pools or either have this really good baseline ballistic skill like the Crosiers had. Now, this has totally changed going into N5, where the best line troops in the game are things like Fenix, who just bring a massive toolbox. And yeah, they got a Thunderbolt as a backup gun. That's cool, that's useful. But what you're looking at here aren't really backup guns. When you're paying a SWIC for a gun, in what can be a SWIC-heavy faction, depending on how you build your military orders, I think that's going too far as a backup gun. So overall, Crosiers, I don't think you're going to see them more, but some of the changes around them, such as the changes to the Knight Commander and the Order Sergeant, might make you want to take them more. So going back, we've had a big change to the Knight Commander. As I mentioned, your armor and CC have gone down, but you've picked up BS attack +1 burst and had some pretty big changes to your loadouts here. So if we go back to Infinity Army, down to the Knight Commander, we can see the first thing that's happened is all these profiles here have dropped by 3 or 4 points, which is great. I mean, before the Knight Commander, you were looking at 27 points and half a SWIC to take the profile that was worth taking, essentially. So this is a really, really good change to see, having no SWIC costs for any of them and heavily reduced points costs. So the first big change here, of course, is we have a chain of command profile. Now, previously, chain of command was very hard to combine military orders. You had to take the Knight of the Holy Sepulchre on what was generally accepted to be the bad profile. You can take a look at my older military orders video for more of a discussion on that, but having a 20-point, very easy, very linkable chain of command in your DZ is massive for the faction. It's always been sort of a thematic, I guess, crutch for military orders, that your knights were sort of leading from the front, you're generally taking active LTs, but this would end up being a real struggle, where usually you'd be gravitating towards Teuton LTs, who always felt like kind of a waste just sitting in the backfield being safe, or lieutenants like Defersen, who were up, who were vulnerable, who were in the thick of things, who presented a real liability for your list. So having this chain of command is a massive, massive, massive change. I think of all the changes, this is probably the second most impactful. Tied with the Order Sergeants who we'll get to, this is very impactful. Then again, this is sort of new. Just the base lieutenant being 20 points, your next cheapest lieutenant is 1 point less on a Teuton. Genuinely, you may just be taking the regular lieutenant Knight Commander. It used to be too expensive to justify just taking the one Order lieutenant, but I think at 20 points, this is now a lieutenant you're very happy to take, absolutely fine to take. So that's a great change too. Then, of course, the Lieutenant +1 order. A bit of a spoiler, nothing in the faction has changed to the point where you're not really wanting to take the Knight of the Holy Sepulchre in every list still, just as your reliable long-range gun. So having this Lieutenant Order +1 is still really, really good. Overall, this Knight Commander change represents a massive change for the faction, and is really going to increase what you can fit in the list and the vulnerability your list has. You're going to have less cataclysmic failure states thanks to the new Knight Commander. Next up, we've had a big change to Infirmers as well, and they've gotten a bit of a glow-up. The move 6-2, they've gotten stealth and a boarding pistol, which is really nice just to have a template in there. So go to the Infirmer now. You can also see that they're still in the, I guess, the Velox fire team section now. So they can follow around your knights, which is really nice just to have a doctor there, especially with how medkits have been pretty heavily nerfed going into this edition. So the new movement's very nice just because it means they can happily keep up with your knights. Other than that, I mean, you're probably still just taking the boarding shotgun profile, if any, and having the template's good too. And just having stealth there just to keep it congruent with the rest of your knights who mostly have stealth. It's a nice change. Do I expect them to be taken? No, I still don't think they're going to be taken. And actually, I think they're probably more likely to be taken in Svalheima. We'll get to Svalheima a little bit later, but they're really, really useful and good now in Svalheima. So ultimately, very happy it's here, but I don't think it's impacting the home faction very much. So next up, the Knight Hospitaller. All options except for deployment become FTO. Multi-rifles get a damage upgrade, and a Timbot Neg 3 firewall on some profiles. I have to say, this might be one of the more disappointing changes, where the Knight Hospitallers really haven't changed at all. The issue with the Knight Hospitaller essentially centered around Frenzy. Aside from the Knight of the Holy Sepulchre, they're really your only durable model who can be doing those long-range gunfights. But even though they've got that capability with the heavy machine gun, being BS-14, they're pretty equivalent to an Orc that's, decently solid. You're still not wanting to put them into gunfights because as soon as you get past that turn 1, suddenly they frenzy, suddenly, in essence, you can treat them as being BS-11 just because of the positive modifiers your opponent's going to have on you. And from then on, they're sort of a 32.1.5 Swick deadweight where they're really not going to be able to effectively do their role. Now, again, we've picked up some FTOs with bonus damage, which is quite nice, and a firewall on the Lieutenant. That at least means, I don't know. I still don't think anything changes here. The emitter, PS7 is nice. Just to have, again, kind of how we talked with the Riot Girls, you can put one of these up on ARO, stop offensive movements just by isolating whatever's running at you, and not deal a wound so you don't trigger Frenzy. But look, weirdly enough, I mean, these not having the forward deployment being able to link, I mean, that was at least kind of cool. And they really haven't gotten anything that's changing that base problem of what Frenzy is doing to the main gunfighter. Now, as glue for the Crusade fire team, they're still probably too expensive to justify. You could take something like Joan of Arc Spitfire and the Knight Hospitaller boarding shotgun emitter just to have that boarding shotgun emitter up on ARO and then sort of go forward. I guess, for 26 points, that's fine. And really kind of with the Teuton missile launcher getting a bit worse and the Knight of Justice missile launcher getting a bit worse, maybe you'd look at this, but unfortunately both of those pieces just got better. But look, it is something to keep in mind and maybe a good way to build a Crusade fire team if you really want to. But overall, I'm very unimpressed with the balance changes to the Hospitaller. Next up, and now this is a very cool one. The Knight of Justice gains number 2, a new Lieutenant option, Forward Observer options, and look, basically they just got a big remix with a lot of their profiles, but they are very, very cool. Here we are. So you can see the first big change here is the Missile Launcher. Got Missile Launcher +1 special die. Now, I've had the chance to play with Missile Launcher +1 special dice with the Swiss Guard, who really has a great impact. So this special die, it's going to apply on active and reactive, meaning on reactive, you're shooting back 2, and if you're linked, 3 dice, and that's the same in active as well. It's genuinely been a really good piece, both offensively and defensively. BS-14 is enough to very much make this scary, and though it's not as good as a Swiss Guard, obviously doesn't have MIM6, it's 20 less points, it's a wild card that can slot in really well anywhere you want it to, and this is going to be a very good offensive and defensive piece. It's one I'd recommend really giving a good crack to and getting on the table. Now, importantly to note, prior to this change, really the only viable Knight of Justice was the Knight of Justice Hacker. Oh, where's the bastard? Was the Knight of Justice Hacker. So even just to add another viable profile is really, really nice. Now, nothing's changed with the Spitfire, but then things start to change again when we get down here. Now, the first one, and the big one, is the Knight of Justice Hacker. It's had a weapon change. First one is a +1 damage multi-marksman rifle. This is quite a good weapon, but of course it does suffer from being in the Spitfire Club, but the Knight of Justice hasn't suffered a points cost up for it, so this is absolutely fine just to take as a backup gun, or just as the primary gun. You can run around with 2 Teutons, or 1 Teuton. That's a duo, baby. And the big one is the Hacker has picked up pitchers. Now, one big change with these balance changes is that the pitcher range bands have been changed. It used to be essentially 0s up to 24, but now it's 0s up to 16, and then -3 at 24. Now, this change really affects linked pictures that are BS11 and BS12, but it's not as much of a deal, as much of a big deal for pitchers who are BS13 and up. So the Knight of Justice is really well positioned to take great advantage of these pitchers. Even past that neg3 band at 24. At neg6, you're still shooting 2 dice on 8s, which genuinely isn't bad. You've still got a pretty decent chance of landing at least one of those. It's a bit of a coin flip, but it's not bad. And then the Knight of Justice, just being a unit who is going to want to move up the board, is going to be able to get angles, is going to be able to get in better range, is going to be probably your better pitcher in the faction, because there is another one now that we'll get to, is a really high-quality pitcher. Just to get out there, get a line, get in good ranges, and start lobbing those things. And 2 dice on 14s, it's incredible. It's incredibly reliable. Very, very reliable. And then just having the gun to back it up as well is great. So look, I think the Knight of Justice, really fantastic piece. I can really see it in a very cheap Haris with Teutonic Knights. Just taking a random Teuton and a Teuton Tinbot. Suddenly you've got a specialist, you've got 2 dice. They're really good just at running forward and being aggressive. And getting an extra die on that pitcher and that multi-marksman rifle, I think is really, really hot. And you're also not paying much for it Swick-wise either, which is great. Now the Forward Observer is here. I don't think you're ever going to take it. Why bother? Just to be frank, I'd much rather be taking the Crux Knight, and I don't think anything they've done here has changed that. Same with the Spitfire, same with the Lieutenant's Forward Observer. I think really you're still just looking at the Hacker and the Missile Launcher, but even just having this Missile Launcher be an option now is really cool, and this Hacker is amazing. In terms of other things you could do with the Knight of Justice, I mean, you could put it with a Knight of Santiago FTO, again, just to get the same bonus as you would with a Teuton, but it's, again, probably putting too much in. You'd have to break the link to effectively hack. Otherwise, you could put it with a Knight Hospitaller FTO emitter, or one with a Tinbot as well. If you're really worried about compressing those fire team slots, you can get a Knight Hospitaller FTO for about 26 points, which is a lot cheaper than taking 2 Teutonic Knights and saves you a slot. And because you've got that tag, that might not be awful. I'm just allergic to Knight Hospitallers and have a deep-seated prejudice against them. So if you can overcome that and find joy and forgiveness in your heart, maybe you can try that duo out. It's got some potential. Alright, next up, the Teutonic Knights. They just got a little bit of a change to some of their Swick weapons, which I think is really good. We've seen the Teutons become a real staple of the well, they used to be a real staple of the faction, now really just in that rushing forward role. So the first one here with the Missile Launcher, it's picked up BS Attack Neg 3, which is really nice. Again, you're a limited cover model, and while something like the Knights of Montesa have Mimetism to combat that sort of, I guess, friction between not being able to get that cover bonus, BS Attack Neg 3 now gives that back to your opponent. Now, the one thing to be wary of is that it does mean if you decide, okay, this face-to-face roll isn't great for me, maybe they've pulled out a model with Hemi-Mim, like Phoenix, suddenly then if you dodge, they're back to shooting you on 16s or whatever. That's pretty awful. So I think that very heavily incentivizes you just to keep shooting with the Missile Launcher. And at 28 points, that is verging on kind of expensive. But I think in terms of, multi-wound AROs, and again, it's limited cover, not no cover, he's still going to have 6 armor. He might be back on the menu just to slap in a military orders fire team, but that really will remain to be seen. The other one here, the Spitfire picked up an X-Visor, and for all the reasons that the Crosier Spitfire X-Visor doesn't matter, that is also true for the Teutonic Knights, and doubly so, where they can't even get cover. I've seen a few people have success with the Spitfire, essentially kind of as a fusillade fire piece and a breakthrough piece, where the goal is never to have anyone in cover, either you or your opponent when you're shooting with this gun. I have heard of some success with that. And the X-Visor's okay in that respect. We're getting kind of better cross-table shots once you're breaching the halfway line. But again, I just don't see it being the best use of your points in your Swick. All right, next up, the Knights of Santiago got a bit of a change here, which is quite nice. Uh, but I don't know. We'll see. So if I can find the damn thing, the first one is he's had a change to move 6-2, which is really great. He was sort of a weird outlier in terms of slow moving knights, so I'm glad that got updated. We also see he's lost the nanopulsar, picked up a boarding pistol. That's whatever. I guess at least he has a better pistol on, things like the Spitfire if they really need it. And then he's also picked up a new lieutenant option for the killer hacking device. This is somewhat interesting, just to have another potential lieutenant. I mean, the Knight of Santiago Spitfire was sort of a lieutenant you could take, who of course suffered from the frenzy rules, and that doesn't change with the Knight of Santiago FTO. Let's say you Trinity someone that's still dealing a wound, you're still going to go frenzy, and suddenly you can't cyber mask. The Knight of Santiago could have been a very interesting potential, sort of played like an interventor lieutenant with a late game ability to really push in and do some damage once things start getting scrappy. But with how Frenzy interacts with Cybermask and marker states, I think it's sort of quashed that potential, and I think it's really quite sad. I think Frenzy really kills the Knight Hospitalers, and I think it's really killing the Knight of Santiago as well. I don't see your base role for the Knight of Santiago changing. I'm very glad he's picked up move 6-2, but otherwise I'm not incredibly impressed, though this profile is interesting and potentially worth experimentation. That being said, it just gets overshadowed so hard by Defersen. Like, incredibly hard by Defersen. I mean, you can take all this kit with a multi-rifle that doesn't pair great with many of the other range bands you can stick it with, and, for admittedly a decent amount of more points, 10 more points, 1.5 Swick, you're getting the whole package. You're not having to worry about, Frenzy. I don't know. I find Knight of Santiago is still a bit hard to justify. Now the Holy Sepulchre, he got a really nice change too, just picking up the move 6-2. And we've had a bit of a rework with what used to be the Chain of Command profile. Again, it's not a profile I think you'll take. It really suffers from being part of the Spitfire Club. I'd much rather just take Joan every single time. I'm never taking the Knight of the Holy Sepulchre, multi-marksman rifle. But look, as I keep saying, the AP HMG, it's such a staple of the faction. It's one where if you're not taking a tag, you should really be asking yourself, why am I not taking this unit? Which in essence really means, why would I be paying this many points to not fill this role that I really need with the AP HMG? I think, you're getting a great benefit with the move 6-2, especially with Holo Projector, where you can fling them forward into mines, etc. And it's a great change. But yeah, look, you're never going to put this profile on the table, but hot damn, really happy for the AP HMG. Going back again, the Trinitarians, they've got a new profile, and this is pretty hilarious. They've picked up a mine layer deployable repeater. And also the mine layers have both picked up Forward Observer, which is a really great change. It used to leave you in a pretty tough spot when you had to look at the mine layer and go, am I really going to drop the ability to be a specialist? Not likely. So having both mine layers pick up Forward Observer is really nice. Of course, you got the Shock Mine one, but you've also picked up this deployable repeater. This is pretty interesting. Just being able to put up a turn 0 repeater net. I think you can build some pretty funny meme lists. Just have a Trinitarian mine layer on one side of the board, have your Peacekeeper on the other, back it up with Defersen and a Knight of Justice. And that's, a pretty hard nut to crack. The thing that I think would really stop this faction from being, a great hacking faction is essentially a lack of Sixth Sense or Combat Instinct hacking. You do have a way to do that if you build that pure Crosier core with the Order Sergeants to get that Sixth Sense hacking. So maybe that's another factor that does push you towards trying to get that whole core together. But yeah, look, it's an interesting change. I don't know how often you're going to use it, but I think it really warrants some testing, just going full-blown into that hacking. And I think, second to NCA, you're probably the best positioned hacking faction in Pano. I mean, you've got great pitchers. Again, we'll get to the Order Sergeant soon. You've got the potential for a turn 0 repeater net, and that's something that other Pano factions just can't do. All right, so going now to Constantinos, he's just changed a little bit. MSV2 to MSV1, CC attack neg 3 doesn't mean anything, censor, and essentially went down about 3 points. Now this is great. I mean, Constantinos, he's been a weird unit, just where he had something the faction finds really valuable in the Disco Bowler, but he used to be 27 points. That was just way, way too hard to justify. So having the multi-rifle is, fine, whatever. Getting a boarding pistol, yeah, great. But Disco Bowler is where it's at. The CC attack neg 3, I'm not sure why it's there. He did used to have an assault pistol, but I think, look, getting access to a template's great. The multi-rifle's close enough and has that better range. And then sensor's pretty interesting as well. If you did want to put this guy kind of into a more forward Crosier team, you could absolutely do that. Or if you put him with, say an Order Sergeant Harry's team, that's great too. He's had a bit of a change with the infiltration Hin deployment, where he didn't used to have the Hin deployment, just used to be infiltration. So you never really wanted to risk that. AP submachine gun, it's just not a weapon I'm interested in. On a Swiss Guard, maybe, but I think it's still ridiculous. Flaming Spear is nice, but just, I don't know. I don't buy it. But having a price drop on the Disco Bowler profile, really, really, really nice, and I'm glad it's there. We've had some changes to Gabriel Defersen, and really they're quite good. So on the overall profile, we've picked up Trinity +1 special die, which is giving you a burst 4 Trinity into someone. Now, with Trinity, you can sometimes struggle, just being locked into burst 3, especially if you're going into someone's network. But having the +1 special die, forcing through an extra save, that's really, really great. And, I mean, just pumps him more. Look, I think Defersen is the most optimized profile in military orders before the update, and remains true after the update. Now, the second thing he's picked up is these two multi-rifle profiles, which I think are pretty lame. I think you should just stay with the Spitfire profile. The Spitfire profiles picked up a Flash Pulse, which is quite cool. Whip 14 Flash Pulse is nothing to sneeze at, especially if you're caught out on arrow against a multi-wound model, or, a model that's not going to care about that Spitfire. Just plopping a Flash Pulse on someone is not bad. Now, the multi-rifle light flamethrower Flash Pulse, I think it's fine. I just don't see a reason to take it over the Spitfire profile. Again, when you're looking at what he can go with, again, you just lack so many of those HMG range bands that there's nothing really great to pair him with. If you pair him with, say, a Bulletier Spitfire or a Joan of Arc Spitfire, well, you may as well just take the Spitfire yourself. That's my view on it. He's BS-14, he's a great shot. Then just pair him with a couple of Teutons, or even just one Teuton for a Tinbot, and he's fucking flying. So I don't really see the point in the multi-rifle profiles, but overall, great change. Very happy with a +1 special die Trinity. And, Flash Pulse is niche, but fine. Alright, next up, Kyle Hawkins. Move 6-2. Mwah. Fizz and Arm -1, bit sad. Losing Berserk, bit sad. Gains BS attack, neg 3, and essentially a new boarding shotgun option. So if we go over and find the young gentleman, overall, 6-2 is really great to have. -1 Fizz and Arm, it's not the end of the world, but losing Berserk's a bit of a shame. But man, this guy, he's very cheap for the good shooting he does, and is really just held back by being in the Spitfire Club once again. He's also Frenzy, and again, Kyle just suffers from competing with too many people. And I think really his one claim to fame is that, I don't know. His one claim to fame is BS attack neg 3, which other people in the Spitfire Club aren't really putting negative mods on you unless you've got, an MSV against a Crux. So being BS-14 with BS attack neg 3 probably makes him the best in the Spitfire Club just on math, which is quite cool. But again, I don't know. He's fine. he's fine, I guess. Then this boarding shotgun profile, I don't really know what they were thinking here. I don't know who's going to take this. Like, yes, this is brutal. A BS attack in Egg 3, burst 4 in a link, boarding shotgun, that's brutal, but that's not something you needed in MO. You've got Teutons who can do, a pretty similar job for many less points and have, relevant links. I think, I don't know. It's a big shame he doesn't have the Crosier tag. He's got the Fusilier tag in Svalheima, so having that line troop link ability might have given him more of a niche, but I don't think this is going to change his playability, which isn't very high. I mean, look, a theme we can see here is you can think about what are the issues and challenges with military orders, and do these changes address those difficulties? With Kyle Hawkins, it's a resounding no. But with something like the Knight Commander, it's a resounding yes. So you just got to look through the lens of, does this help what the problems are? Does this make me more playable? I think this just makes Kyle Hawkins more Kyle Hawkins, and you'll take Kyle Hawkins if you want Kyle Hawkins. All right, next up, Mendoza. This is sick. This is something a lot of people have been asking for a very, very long time. We've got the two forward deployment profiles. They've both picked up a decoy, which is great, and helps alleviate some of the problems with being Mendoza, essentially with being forward deployed heavy infantry. I still think that forward deployed Mendoza, if you tell me he's really good, and I ask you, did you go first or second, and you say first, I'm discounting your opinion. This guy is... he's the most tilted model based off of whether you go first or second. If you go first, he can win the game on the spot. If you go second, he can just do nothing all game. But, look, part of the issue was, if you were going second, the smart thing to do was just to put him back in your DZ, or put him somewhere sort of where he's not getting the full benefit of that forward deployment. And at that point, you sort of think, well, I may as well just have an FTO. And now you've got that FTO. So I think I'm really chuffed about this, to be frank. I think it's really quite cool. The one sad thing about it is, ideally, I'd want to be strapping this to, Defersen or a Knight of Justice hacker, but just with the way they've changed the knightly duos, you used to just be able to, slap a Knight of Justice. He was a way to build this. That's a bit sad. I think you can pretty happily pair him up with a Joan of Arc V2, and he's going to do quite well, or run him forward with an aggressive Order Sergeant team, where you take Mendoza, an Order Sergeant hacker, and then a Bulletier. You're not going to get a link bonus there, but that's still a bit of fun. Or you just put him with some Teutons and, other bits and bobs, or like an Order Sergeant, and maybe, I don't know, a HMG Crosier. But what he's really going to suffer from is not having a tag, and not being able to go in, he doesn't have a tag. He doesn't have great duos that he can go into. And these link teams here, he doesn't necessarily gel very well with. I think he's far more playable than he's ever been, and I'm really glad this option's here. But I don't know how often this is going to translate to him being seen on the table. But I'm really, really glad it's here. Really glad it's here. All right, next up, we've got Joan and Joan V2. Who sort of got the treatment that Willy Wally did with the latest updates. So we'll just first Joan we see. This will show it pretty simply, where they've both picked up chain of command non-specialist profiles. And this is really great. Again, you can run an aggressive LT like Defersen, and then take Joan chain of command. And it's a nice option to have. The awkward thing for me is, she's still a very vulnerable chain of command. And if you're looking at, okay, what aggressive LTs do I want to run in military orders? Really, it's Defersen, a Teuton, or Joan. So if you're taking chain of command Joan, I mean, part of me just says, well, just take Lieutenant Joan, and then take the chain of command Knight Commander. And, if you're taking both chain of command Joan and Defersen, that's 100 points on two Spitfires. Mind you, they're fucking cracked Spitfires, and Defersen's my goat. But I think this fits in a bit of a weird place. I think it fits a bit better kind of on the base Joan profile, but with base Joan's link options being so terrible, it's rough. Like, you don't want to take a Knight Hospitaller. You just don't. If the Knight Hospitaller HMG was good, then maybe I could see you making a bit more use of this with, like, base Joan, but otherwise it's a bit of a weird look on the, like, Spitfire version when the new Knight Commander exists, and I think you're probably better off just taking the Knight Commander, but I'm glad the option's here. It's a cool option. Alright, now that's the end of the, I suppose, general look at military orders, but there's lots of little changes that's happened to other PanOceanian factions. First up, Fusiliers snipers now cost 1 Swick. Literally no one cares and is ever going to use that ever. The factions where it was really popular to use just a core of Fusiliers were Svalheima and Varuna, where it's just not an option you're going to take. In Varuna, you'll just take your Kamau sniper instead, and in Svalheima, with how good their duos are, you're really just going to focus on those duos instead. Drummers got a new BS attack neg-3 option, and Forward Observer, where the drummer itself has a multi-sniper rifle, which is pretty funny, to be honest. It's quite funny. So if we take a look back, what a nightmare. So if you take a look back at the drummer, if we can be bothered to. Oh, God. Here we go. So yeah, you can see the BS attack neg-3 Forward Observer multi-sniper with Drumbot 5. It's a funny profile. I don't think it's going to get taken, just because, at the end of the day, you're a burst 2 multi-sniper. The Drumbot 5 isn't, it's not knocking any doors down. You've also got the Black Air K1 Marksman getting cheaper by a point. That's really nice, but sort of whatever. The Vargur K1 Marksman -1 point. Now, this is a unit you will actually consider taking sometimes. So I'm pretty happy just to see that change. It always felt pretty bad compared to the heavy rocket launcher, just because it was so much more expensive than the HRL. So I'm glad to see that change. How have we done this? We've missed the biggest change in military orders, one of which is the Order Sergeant. So going back quickly to military orders, I kept bringing it up too. What a nightmare. The Order Sergeant Hacker has picked up pictures. That's really what you need to know. It's picked up pictures, which on a BS-12 linkable troop is pretty good. Again, one of these linked up in a full link is the only way to get a 6th Sense Hacker and MO. But at 18 points and half a Swick, having a picture on a BS-12 unit who's, happy to sort of move out and have a bit of fun is a really, really great change. Now, a few of them have picked up nanopulsars as well, which is quite nice. And then, so that you're kind of getting that Auxilla sort of vibe there. It's a bit of a shame the Escort Sergeant Hacker didn't pick up a picture. That would have been pretty cool. But again, you're really here for the linked pictures. I just like Escort Sergeants personally. Then the HRL picked up Neurocynetics. And this makes it actually kind of a bit of a cool defensive piece. It's a shame you can't link it, essentially. And it is expensive Swick-wise. But you can build military orders in a way where you're not using a ton of Swick if you're taking things like the Crux Knight. And just having that Oxbot as template defense, I think is really cool. Also, if they get within 8, a Neurocynetics assault pistol with BS-12 is absolutely no joke. I think that's crazy, crazy cool. So someone please test this profile. Otherwise, the Order Sergeant having the picture, absolutely massive. All right. So the Infirmarers, we mentioned them being ironically better in Svalheima. Now, this is because we've had a few changes to the Svalheima fireteams chart that I think are really going to benefit them. Now, the first one here is we've got the Blade linkable again. That's absolutely huge. The Blade used to be a wildcard in Svalheima, and you could run crazy, absolutely crazy, with attack-aware orders. Now, you can't do that anymore now, which is absolutely fine, but it's still nice just to have it as an option with a relevant tag. Then, if we sort of go down this way, you can see that if you look at the Nice team, it's now very lonely because your machinist got moved out just to the wildcards. Cool, whatever. But the big thing is that the Infirmarer now has picked up 2 tags and wildcard. So Winterforce Alpha linking probably not with Vargur just because they want to jump, but linking with orcs is quite nice just to have a doctor there. And then nieces as well. Now, you always used to take a machinist just to have that very cheap link. And if you're looking at a machinist, a winter form machinist, they're costing you 17 points. And now so are infirmers. Now, nieces, they didn't really benefit from from an engineer, just because they're not heavy troops. But they're really going to benefit from the infirmer being a doctor. They're units who are just 1 wound, so they're a bit floppy, but they've got an okay amount of armor, so it's not, it's not unthinkable that your niece is going to go down to just unconscious. And then, hey, having a good doctor to back it up, really, really good. So, that's quite nice. The second thing is orc troops have now gained expanded winter force options. We've seen this, they've always had that multi-rifle option that felt, a bit limited, and we've seen the Varuna division profiles roll out in Varuna that have been really high quality. So, again, you're paying just 1 point sort of on top of your other junk, and you're picking up Climbing Plus. Now, this is really good, just because it synergizes quite well with Karhu. Everyone can now sort of run around together in that sense, and Climbing Plus, you've played it, it's a really good profile. Sorry, it's a really good skill. So, it's very cool to see those options expanded, and for the cost of a point, I think you're pretty happy about that. Then sort of going down further in the line, the Locusts swaps infiltration for 4 deployment +8, and had a bit of a cost drop. I think that's cool. That's fine. Your picture is a little bit worse now, but whatever. The Kestrel machine is removed. I don't think anyone's gotten a bad eye on that. But then, I think the other big headline, just for general PanO players, is the Redeye getting a lot better. So the first one is just flat BS-14. Is pretty crazy on a vehicle. So you're flying a million bajillion miles an hour with your BS-14. That's the highest ballistic skill of any vehicle. And then also you're picking up the new tech recovery skill. So the tech recovery skill, it's come with, the updates with the beautiful next wave models, where essentially you can recover states by being gizmo kitted. Now, this is a big deal. One of the really big issues with vehicles is that someone could brick you, and then, because of aerial, you couldn't get to them, or they'd just be too annoying to get to. So, having that tech recovery is really, really good, and giving you a really good reason, not to be so scared about taking a vehicle. A sensor is really nice, especially in a low whip faction. Having a sensor is really good, especially because you can fly X amount of inches towards the marker in question. So, if you look at units like Constantinos, you're scared to discover, and you're scared to discover shoot. Because if you want to try and discover something like a Cataran, well, you're going to come around the corner and they're just going to blow your head off. But the Redeye with that movement can maneuver well enough to get, under some of those arrows or kind of get in a minefield and then pop that sensor off. Being on a big base, you're getting a bit more there as well, which is really great. Then the last change here, which is really, really cool, is that the grenade launchers picked up continuous damage, and this mixed with the BS-14, you're shooting them on 8s. I just think that's going to be hilarious. A few people are going to really, really enjoy that. So, that's the big update for PanOceania. We'll be back looking at a few more of the factions, but do tell me what you think about all these changes. Overall, I think military orders, it's benefited quite a bit. But I'm admittedly a bit sad that units like the Knight Hospitaller and Knight of Santiago didn't really benefit overall, just being brutally honest. But I think the Knight Commander change is absolute cinema, as is the Order Sergeants just getting great pictures, fantastic, and the Knight of Justice getting really good pictures as well. I think those 3 changes, just absolute cinema. Revolutionize the faction is a bit of a strong word, but I think they're going to be doing really, really big things. So if you stayed towards the end, please hit me with an Ultima ratio in the in the comments below. And thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.